ICE in our community still. The government shutdown, in fact, the longest government shutdown in history. But it sounds like it could be coming to an end. We do have U.S. Representative Mike Quigley joining us right now to talk about some of these big issues that are going on at the state capitol, but also impacting us right here in the city of Chicago. Thank you so much for your time today and joining us to really break down some of these big topics.
I appreciate it. Glad to be back.
Let's talk about this. I know last week you held a press conference. This was a day after the daycare teacher was removed from the facility by ICE. The video was absolutely shocking. It went viral. Everyone is still talking about it. There's been reports that Greg Bavino is leaving Chicago soon. We know he's been heading up these operations here in Chicago. He says he's not leaving. What do you have to say about ICE's presence here in the city of Chicago?
Look, this is a president acting like a bully. I mean, did we ever imagine an American president would say to a group of U.S. generals that our cities should be used as a training ground for the military to go after the enemy from within? I'm not sure what he meant by the enemy from within, but I'm starting to think it starts with people with brown skin. I think it's also important to remember that under Democratic and Republican presidents, Homeland Security had a practice, an understandable one, to avoid sensitive locations, daycares, schools, places of worship. Obviously, that's all gone by the wayside, and it's extraordinarily concerning. And, you know, I want people to know it's not just taking away citizens, it's taking away people who they're targeting. They've actually detained 170 U.S. citizens. It's also having an effect on our business community. If you go to Little Village in Pilsen and other areas of the city, their business is down 50% just because people, documented or not, are afraid to go to their establishments. It's a shocking turn of events, and I'm proud of the way Chicagoans are pushing back.
Well, yeah, you know, we just said as we saw the video the next day, you went up in front of press and you know, you spoke to the community. It was pretty quick, right? And it seems like a lot of stuff was going on. But was it that shocking video that compelled you to say, you know what, this is the last straw, I need to say something?
Well, I have been across the city in the weeks that ICE has been operating. I was at Bethany, a shelter for women, where women are afraid to take their kids to daycare so they can go to work. I was at the domestic violence courthouse, where the advocates told me that when ICE went there, from then on, women were afraid to go back and get orders of protection. And I've had to help walk kids to school, the walking school bus, because parents can't do it. We've heard from neighbors who said that their neighbors' kids came to them because they came home and their parents weren't there. Well, finally, we have a 16-year-old young lady who's a cancer patient, and she's in a wheelchair. Her father was taken because he was working an extra day to help pay her medical bills. This is shocking stuff. So I think the reason I did it, and it was the day of the raid on the daycare, is just because it's the culmination of all this. And I think Chicagoans get it, but we wanted to express to a larger audience just what's going on and what they can do.
I want to ask, is there anything going on behind the scenes on a federal and state level? And follow me with this. And I ask this question because as of right now, we know that people are being detained, right? But we don't know the true numbers. In some cases, we don't even know where these people are being shipped off to. At one point, we were told that this would be, you know, the rounding up of the worst of the worst. Well, in some cases, these people are just trying to make sure their paperwork is in place so they can become a U.S. citizen, which we know can be a daunting task and a very long process. Is there any work going on behind the scenes to figure out who's being detained, where they're going, what the numbers reflect, the truth? Because so far, these numbers aren't always reflecting truth.
No, look, the federal court said that the government has misled them, has lied to them. They're in violation of a consent decree with the indiscriminate use of tear gas. with warrantless searches on private property, coming to a scene with blank search warrants. So the government's credibility is shot, and unfortunately, it's worse than that. My office has been unsuccessful in many of these cases, just trying to help the families find where their relatives are. The attorneys are doing the same thing. The administration has been opaque on this, and they haven't been forthright. They have deliberately lied about where people are and moved them around so we can't find them. What's happening, in D.C. is we're just now getting back to work, but there is legislation that'll be proposed. Protect Sensitive Locations Act is just one of them that I'm supporting. That'll, prohibit the enforcement actions taking place in the places that we talked about. I think there'll be opportunities in the future to hold those in violation of law accountable for what's taking place. But right now, it's letting the public know and working as hard as we can in my office and others my other colleagues on this, just to help people know their rights and protect others in the meantime.
One more question just with this topic. Tia mentioned Bovino and the report that, he could potentially be leaving Chicago soon. He said that he's not. I guess, what do you think about the possibility of him leaving? Do you have any response to that? It really would mean that he's probably going somewhere else, right?
Yeah, look, we're hearing the rumors too, but again, this is an administration that's notifying Congress, particularly Democrats, of anything. So they didn't confer with the state or local officials when they talked about bringing the National Guard here. They certainly haven't with ICE operations. So I'm not sure what they're going to do, if they're going to tone it down for the winter, go someplace else. We're hearing they're going to quadruple the effort later on. They're simply not sharing for that. So for me to guess what they're going to do is just to speculate. In the meantime, I'm hoping that this continued public response to this, reflected in larger issues, I think, in the election of the Tuesday before, is showing a lack of public support for what the president is doing.
We do want to talk to you about the government shutdown potentially coming to an end. We do have to take a quick break. We want to talk about that important topic with you. Please don't go anywhere, and our audience, don't go anywhere either. We'll take this quick break and we'll be right back. About a lot of things going on with our government impacting us here locally as well, here in the state of Illinois. One of those things that has definitely impacted us, the government shutdown, the longest in history. It sounds like it is coming to an end. Some people are not happy about this. They feel like the Democrats should have pressed a little bit longer. I want to get your opinion on this. This is a 43-day win, it sounds like, for the Democrats to secure. I know they were trying to secure extending health care subsidies for millions of Americans. What's the benefit of this deal that is potentially reached here?
Look, I think the frustration here is that there was a deal before, and Trump and our Republican colleagues reneged on it. The president also refused to enforce existing laws and how we spend our money. So fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, it's going to be our silliness of going along with this deal, unfortunately, and the 8 that decide to vote for it. I would say the other part of this is, as you suggest, that for 24 million Americans, their health insurance premiums are going to double. When the Medicaid cuts take place, you're going to add tens of millions of more Americans. There was something to be done there. There was a deal to be made there. And I think, again, the last Tuesday's election showed us that I think the American people disagreed with the president, that there was no need to give in at this point. Look, we want the government shutdown to end, but the Republicans are in control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. This is their shutdown. If they wanted our help, it was to restore cuts to Americans and affordability of health care at a time when it's most essential. And that was a fight worth doing.
What happens in January when this bill expires? Will we be going through this all over again?
Well, look, there's the possibility of this. There would be a partial shutdown, but absolutely. In the meantime, all that they really got out of this deal, other than the promise that they wouldn't fire the people they fired, that they wouldn't, they would keep those people on, and that people would get their money who were furloughed. And I want air travel to get back to normal. I want all the other things that matter. But we've done nothing to guarantee that we're not going to be in the same boat in January, and we've done absolutely nothing to change the views of my Republican colleagues on this, to move forward on this. A vague promise that they're going to have a vote in the Senate on the ACA healthcare tax contributions means absolutely nothing. And there's silence from Speaker Johnson. So in the final analysis, we got almost nothing in this deal. I suspect it will pass the Republican House tonight, and we'll move forward and see where we are in January.
Senator Quigley, we were reading this morning, about who voted yay, who voted nay. There was a Republican senator, Rand Paul, I think it was, maybe Kentucky, who voted no. And it's something over, I guess, like a fight over hemp, does it sound like? And he's kind of the one maybe stalling things?
Yeah, look, Senator Paul is a unique style of legislation and governing, so he'll have to explain that. I think he's probably one who votes against most of these measures, regardless of the circumstances. Look, there's a lot of things in this bill that are concerning. The fact that they were thrown in at the last minute with little or no discussion. I'm hoping that there is at least some of that in the House tonight. But again, it's probably going to pass, and the government will reopen, which is good news. The fact is, millions will lose their health care, and the beneficiaries will be the richest Americans, our billionaires.
I know you mentioned this slightly there. You talked about, air travel. We know O'Hare has been impacted, Midway has been impacted, and frankly, airports across the country have been impacted by this government shutdown. You're also part of the House Appropriations Committee. Have you seen the shutdown impact other portions of transit and infrastructure, maybe that we haven't talked about as much in the headlines?
Yeah, look, it's going to have a long-term impact on things just because so much work wasn't done. There were firings that took place. There's an overall cost to the economy of this. So to answer your question, you're going to see this unfold even after the government reopens, that every shutdown costs more money than it's ever worth. And it's going to have a long-term ripple effect on this, as will the DOGE cuts. There will be aspects of the transportation, housing, healthcare, and so forth that will be impacted because of those cuts and because of this shutdown. It's just going to take a while before they're evident to the public.
Is there something that we can, do in the future to help protect local residents from feeling the impacts of the shutdown? Because again, things might change again in January and a year from now, who knows? And I think there's maybe things that could be put in place that could help local residents.
I wish that there were. I think that what we're talking about right now, funding our soldiers, funding the air traffic controllers and others, we need to recognize that these are critical workers, and they should be allowed to get paid while this is taking place. They should be exempt from any sort of government shutdown. Will the administration go along with that? I doubt it, but it's frustrating to see the impact. In the final analysis, we need to elect people who are willing to compromise. I have compromised on government shutdown votes in the past, but this isn't a compromise, it's a capitulation. This isn't a compromise. It's really setting us back. Again, in the final analysis, we're giving billionaires tax breaks and taking away the health care of tens of millions of people. This was a fight worth fighting.
There's been this back and forth over the SNAP benefits. And in fact, we've gotten a few emails here at Fox 32 saying that, I got a little bit of an increment on my SNAP, but it was like $17, $8. Any idea what is the latest on the front in terms of SNAP benefits? What is the latest information out there?
Well, look, when we end the government shutdown, they should be brought back and made whole. But to answer your question back to what took place, there were varying court decisions and an administration that was willing to go to the Supreme Court to make sure that people didn't get their SNAP benefits. You know, I was in line, I was helping distribute food in the lines at St. Sabina with Father Flager a couple Saturdays ago. People were waiting for 4 hours to get one box of food, and they were standing in the cold. It shows you just how dramatic this need is, how important SNAP is to Chicago citizens. So that should never happen again. And it's extraordinarily distressing. While this was happening, while people were going without, people were not getting full meals, the President of the United States was holding a party, right? A great Gatsby type party, sort of flaunting this. The fact that people are suffering and not caring, asking the Supreme Court to reinforce this so that funding didn't take place. So indeed, some people got partial funding. They should have got funding throughout the entire measure. And that's what the rulings in the court, I think, we're leaning toward. We haven't seen what the Supreme Court was going to do, and the shutdown will probably end that effort.
What's your message to your constituents, considering that it sounds like even going into the new year, we may be in for a bumpy road here? What will be your message to people out there watching that at some point, you know, I think some of us feel helpless. We're watching all of this play out. Sure, we can get in a food line and help, you know, serve our neighbors, you know, make sure that they have food on the table. But in some cases, it's not much you can do. You know, if your SNAP benefits don't show up, it's not like you could go knock on the president's door and get those benefits to start rolling in. So some of us do feel helpless. What would be your words to the constituents out there that they don't know what's coming next?
Yeah. Broadly speaking, your voice matters, politics matters, being involved matters, engaged. If you don't like things, you need to participate. Now's more telling of that than any time I remember in my lifetime. So I think our country's at a turning point. I think the two topics today are evident of that. I think that government dysfunction is a healthcare risk. It's a national security risk. We need people who are willing to compromise and not take extreme positions. I think one of the hardest parts, you know, again, I voted for a compromise in previous shutdowns with a Republican leader of the House because they were meeting in the middle and there was a reasonable sense of what a compromise is. This administration has staked out extraordinarily far-right positions, and we simply can't go out there to compromise with them. It's that sort of thoughtful decision-making. But it begins with the American people and whether they're involved and engaged and whether they participate in that process. We certainly welcome it.
Yeah, we need more people to vote. That is the truth of the matter, you know, period.
Yeah.
You need to exercise your right to vote. I mean, it's no excuse to continuously see low voter turnout, especially when we're talking about some of the people that are not voting. They get some of these benefits. They need to vote.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. So we appreciate you joining us on the show
Anytime.
today.